Most people assume that by the time you reach your 60s or 70s, the damage is done, that the habits of a lifetime have already written the ending, and the best you can do now is manage the decline. The people of Ikaria in Greece didn't get that memo. Neither did the shepherds of Sardinia, who are still walking miles of hillside terrain in their 90s. Or the centenarians of Okinawa, who test sharper cognitively at 85 than most Americans do at 65. Dan Buettner, the researcher who spent years documenting the lives of Blue Zone residents, found that the single most actionable difference came down to what was not in their kitchens. Here are 10 foods you will never find in a Blue Zone kitchen and what they eat instead. And when we get to number 7, you'll never look at your morning routine the same way again. Number 1. Processed meat. There is a shelf in almost every supermarket in the world dedicated entirely to bacon, salami, ham, hot dogs, pepperoni, and lunch meat. It smells good. It is cheap. It is convenient. Oh, and the World Health Organization has classified the entire category as a Group 1 carcinogen, which is the same classification given to tobacco, asbestos, and arsenic. What they found was that eating 50 grams of processed meat a day, which is less than 2 slices of bacon, increases the risk of colorectal cancer by 18%. The mechanism is well understood. Processed meats are cured with nitrite, which converts to carcinogenic compounds in the stomach, and the combination of high heat, added preservatives, and heme iron creates a consistent pattern of cellular damage over time. For people over 65, this matters more than it does for younger adults. The cumulative effect of decades of processed meat consumption is already present in the body in the form of chronic low-level inflammation. Adding more doesn't just create future risk. It actively feeds the inflammatory processes already associated with heart disease and cognitive decline that become the dominant health concerns in this stage of life. In every Blue Zone, meat is eaten approximately 5 times a month, in small portions, and it is never processed. What they eat instead is beans, lentils, chickpeas. A half cup of legumes a day is the cornerstone protein of every Blue Zone diet, and the research on what that does to cardiovascular and cognitive health over decades is as strong as any finding in nutrition science. The morning bacon isn't something they gave up. It was simply never part of the rhythm to begin with. Number 2. Soda, including diet soda. Buettner is direct on this point. Soda, in any form, was essentially unknown to Blue Zone centenarians. Their equivalent is water, herbal tea, or coffee, and they have been drinking those things every single day for a century. The problem with soda is not just the sugar. Though a standard soda can deliver roughly 10 teaspoons of it in liquid form, which hits the bloodstream in a way that solid food simply does not. The deeper issue is what decades of that daily spike does to the body over time. Researchers who followed over 100,000 adults for 30 years found that each daily serving meaningfully raised the risk of dying from cardiovascular disease. Not dramatically for anyone can, compounded across thousands of them. The people who switched to diet soda, thinking they had solved it, did not solve it. Recent research tracking artificial sweeteners found that high consumption was associated with cognitive decline equivalent to nearly 2 years of accelerated brain aging. Switching to diet was never the solution. It was a different version of the same problem. What Blue Zone people drink instead is genuinely simple. Water throughout the day, coffee in the morning, lightly sweetened with honey or black, herbal tea in the afternoon, which in Ikaria doubles as a source of anti-inflammatory compounds their doctors never thought to prescribe. A small glass of red wine with an evening meal in the Mediterranean zones. That is the full list, a list you can adopt too. Simple, inexpensive, and available in any kitchen within 5 minutes of making the decision to change. Number 3. White bread. This is the one that tends to provoke the most resistance. Because bread has been a staple of daily life for thousands of years, and telling someone in their 60s or 70s that the bread they have eaten every morning of their life is a problem feels like an overreach. But the bread Blue Zone people eat, and the bread sitting in your kitchen cupboards right now, are essentially different foods. Standard supermarket white bread is refined starch. The grain has been stripped of its fibre, its germ, and most of its nutritional content, then processed into something that spikes blood sugar almost as fast as table sugar. For older people, whose insulin sensitivity naturally decreases with age, repeated blood sugar spikes across decades of daily toast accumulate into an elevated baseline inflammation that shows up as fatigue, brain fog, joint pain, and elevated cardiovascular risk. Blue Zone bread is sourdough, or 100% whole grain, and that distinction is not a trend or a marketing category. Fermentation fundamentally transforms the bread. It lowers the glycemic index significantly, reduces gluten content, and produces beneficial organic acids that support gut health. The slowly cooked oats and barley that feature in Sardinian and Okinawan mornings are doing something metabolically different to the body than a white sandwich slice ever could. The swap is not a sacrifice. A good sourdough from a proper bakery, made with real fermentation rather than additives, is a genuinely better product in every way. It tastes better, it keeps better, and it does something completely different inside the body. Number 4. Packaged breakfast cereal. It is worth pausing on what a Blue Zone elder is actually eating for breakfast, because the contrast with the average Western morning is striking. An Okinawan morning often begins with miso soup, a small bowl of steamed rice and vegetables. A Sardinian shepherd might eat sourdough bread with olive oil and a hard-boiled egg. Neither of them opens a cardboard box. The concept of a product designed specifically to be eaten for breakfast, made from refined grain, shaped into interesting pieces, and then fortified with synthetic vitamins to compensate for the nutrition that was processed out during manufacturing, is a modern industrial invention less than a century old. Most commercial breakfast cereals are high glycemic index foods, regardless of what the packaging says about fibre or whole grain content. The sugar content in a single bowl of many popular brands, including one specifically marketed at health-conscious adults, exceeds what you would find in a chocolate biscuit. If you are managing blood sugar, weight, energy levels, or cognitive health, starting the day with a refined carbohydrate spike sets the metabolic tone for everything that follows. What Blue Zone people eat instead is slow food. Properly cooked oats, which means rolled oats simmered on a stovetop, rather than instant sachets processed to near powder, barley softened in broth, whole grain sourdough with olive oil and an egg alongside it. These foods release energy slowly, support stable blood sugar across the morning, and keep the body and brain in a state that a bowl of processed flakes simply cannot replicate. The body in its 60s and 70s responds to that difference every single day, and the response compounds across thousands of mornings. Number 5. Packaged snacks. Research on diet and obesity has identified potato chips as the single food most strongly correlated with weight gain over time. The reason is partly the ingredients and partly the engineering. These products are specifically formulated for a combination of crunch, salt concentration, and fat content that is genuinely difficult for the brain to register as finished. The signal that tells you to stop eating doesn't arrive the way it does with whole food. The bag empties, and you are not entirely sure how. The combination of high refined carbohydrates, excess sodium, and industrial seed oils in most packaged snacks contributes directly to the blood pressure elevation and arterial inflammation that become the dominant cardiovascular concerns in later life. High blood pressure is one of the most significant, modifiable risk factors for both stroke and dementia. The daily bowl of crackers in front of the evening news is not the cause, but it is a daily contribution to a cumulative burden the body is already managing. Blue Zone people don't resist these foods through extraordinary willpower. They were never in the house to begin with. Buettner's most practical insight from decades of research is that the kitchen itself determines behaviour far more reliably than intention does. What they snack on instead is nuts. 2 handfuls a day, consistently, across every Blue Zone. Almonds in Ikaria and Sardinia, pistachios in Nicoya, walnuts with the Adventists in Loma Linda. Research from the Adventist Health Study found that nut eaters outlive non-nut eaters by an average of 2 to 3 years. Replace the bag of chips with a small bowl of unsalted nuts beside the chair, and the decision has already been made before hunger arrives. Number 6. Cow's milk. This is the item that surprises people most, because cow's milk has been positioned as a cornerstone of healthy eating in the Western world for most of the past century. Strong bones, Essential calcium, the glass of milk beside every meal. For many people in this age group, this messaging was delivered in school, reinforced by doctors, and never seriously questioned. Milk from cows does not figure significantly in any Blue Zone diet. In Sardinia and Ikaria, where dairy does appear, it is goat or sheep milk, fermented into yogurt or aged cheese, eaten in small amounts a few times a week. The distinction matters for several reasons. Research suggests up to 60% of people have some degree of difficulty digesting lactose, often without connecting their symptoms to dairy consumption at all. Bloating, inflammation, and digestive discomfort that people attribute to age or stress often has a much simpler explanation. Fermented dairy products have had much of their lactose converted during the fermentation process, making them significantly easier for the body to handle. What Blue Zone people eat instead is full-fat, naturally fermented yogurt made from goat or sheep milk, with nothing added. A small portion alongside a meal, a few times a week, not a daily glass of semi-skimmed. For bone health, which is a genuine concern for this age group, the supporting research on vitamin D, weight-bearing movement, and magnesium-rich foods is considerably stronger than the case for daily cow's milk consumption. The calcium argument for cow's milk is largely a marketing story. The Blue Zone alternative of goat's or sheep milk is a genuinely better product that the body absorbs more efficiently and tolerates far more comfortably. Number 7. Fruit juice. Here is the one that will shock you. The orange juice that has been part of the morning routine for as long as anyone can remember. The thing parents gave their children and considered responsible. The product that carries a health halo so powerful that most people would be genuinely surprised to find it on this list at all. Here's the thing. Blue Zone people eat fruit. They do not drink it. When you eat a whole orange, the fibre it contains regulates how quickly the sugar enters your bloodstream. It slows the absorption, triggers satiety signals, and creates a measured metabolic response. When you drink a glass of orange juice, you remove all of that fibre and deliver the concentrated sugar of 3 or 4 oranges directly and rapidly into your blood. The glycemic response is comparable to a can of cola. The satiety signals are almost entirely absent. The pancreas responds the same way it responds to soda. For people over 65, whose insulin sensitivity has naturally declined, and who may already be managing blood sugar, this is not a theoretical concern. It is a daily metabolic event happening every morning at breakfast. Research consistently shows that whole fruit consumption is associated with reduced diabetes risk, while fruit juice consumption is associated with increased risk. The juice is not a fruit. It is the sugar extracted from a fruit with the protective part removed. The swap here is the simplest one on the entire list. Eat the orange, or the apple, the pear, the handful of berries. Put it beside the breakfast plate whole. The fibre is not a bonus feature of the fruit, it is the entire point of eating it. Number 8. Sweetened condiments. Nobody reaches for the ketchup and thinks about the sugar. That is precisely the problem. Buettner flags this category specifically because it represents hidden sugar that accumulates invisibly and daily. A tablespoon of standard ketchup contains around a teaspoon of added sugar. A serving of many popular bottled salad dressings delivers 2 to 3 teaspoons. Sweet chili sauce, barbecue sauce, teriyaki, most jarred pasta sauces, these are sugar delivery vehicles wearing the disguise of flavouring, and they are applied automatically at meal after meal without anyone registering them as a sugar source. The cumulative effect across a year is significant, and it sits entirely outside the awareness of most people who are otherwise genuinely trying to eat well. Someone managing their blood sugar carefully, who still reaches for the salad dressing every day, may be adding the equivalent of several hundred teaspoons of sugar to their annual diet from a bottle they never think twice about. What Blue Zone people use instead requires no recipe and no special shopping trip. Extra virgin olive oil and red wine vinegar on a salad. Lemon and olive oil over vegetables. Fresh herbs and garlic stirred into almost everything. A small amount of good quality olive oil to finish a dish. These are the flavours of Ikaria, Sardinia and Nicoya, and none of them have a label worth reading because none of them have ingredients worth hiding. For anyone already using olive oil in their cooking, this swap costs nothing at all. It is simply a matter of putting the bottle of dressing down and reaching for the oil instead. Number 9. Packaged sweets. Blue Zone people eat sweet things. They are not living lives of flavourless deprivation. But what they eat is made at home, eaten in small portions and saved for occasions that warrant celebration. The concept of unwrapping something from a packet and eating it automatically while doing something else, at the desk, in the car, in front of the television, does not exist in their world. The granola bar deserves a specific mention because it has been so successfully repositioned as a health food that most people reaching for one genuinely believe they are making a responsible choice. Many popular brands contain more added sugar than a standard biscuit. The oats and nuts are present, but they are suspended in a binding agent that is essentially sweetened syrup, and the portion size is calibrated to leave you wanting another one immediately after finishing the first. This is also the right moment to mention low-fat products specifically, because they matter particularly to a generation that was told fat was the problem and spent decades avoiding it. When fat is removed from food, it needs to be replaced with something to maintain palatability. That something is almost always sugar. Many low-fat yogurts contain more sugar, ounce for ounce, than soda. The health food aisle has been doing this for decades, and the packaging has been designed specifically to ensure nobody notices. What to eat instead is what Blue Zone people actually reach for when they want something sweet. Fresh fruit, which delivers sweetness alongside fibre, vitamins and antioxidants. A small square of good quality dark chocolate on occasion. A handful of dates, which are how Nicoyans satisfy a sweet craving and have been doing so for generations. These are not compromises. They are the actual foods that you could be having too. Number 10. Industrial seed oils. Pick up the standard bottle of cooking oil from a typical kitchen shelf. The label probably says sunflower oil, vegetable oil, corn oil, or some blended version of those things. It is cheap, flavourless, and seems completely neutral. It has been in kitchens since roughly the middle of the 20th century, and nobody questions it because it has simply always been there. Blue Zone cooking begins and ends with extra virgin olive oil, not as an occasional drizzle, but as the only cooking fat in use. Industrial seed oils of the kind that fill most kitchen cupboards today are, in historical terms, extremely new. They did not exist in any meaningful form in traditional diets anywhere on Earth before the modern food industry created them. They are high in omega, 6 fatty acids that, in the quantities delivered by daily cooking, promote systemic inflammatory processes in the body over time. For people over 65, chronic inflammation is not an abstract future risk. It is the mechanism underlying most of the conditions that define aging badly, cardiovascular disease, joint deterioration, cognitive decline, and metabolic dysfunction. Extra virgin olive oil works in the opposite direction. The oleocanthal it contains actively reduces inflammatory pathways and assists in clearing the amyloid plaques associated with Alzheimer's disease. Research found that middle-aged people in Ikaria who consumed around 6 tablespoons of olive oil daily appeared to reduce their risk of dying by half compared to those using it less. The combination of almost exclusive olive oil use and almost zero dementia on that island is not considered a coincidence by the researchers who study it. The swap costs a little more per bottle. Pour it generously over vegetables, use it for low to medium heat cooking, and finish dishes with it rather than butter. This single change removes industrial seed oils from the vast majority of home cooking in one decision and replaces them with the one fat that appears consistently in the diets of every population on Earth that is aging well. The centenarians of Sardinia and Okinawa are not living longer because they have exceptional willpower or because they made a decision in their 60s to finally get serious. They are living longer because the foods on this list were never in their world to begin with. The processed meat, the soda, the white bread, the cereals, the seed oils, these are all recent inventions. Their kitchens were simply built before those inventions arrived, and they never changed. But you can change yours. Not all at once, and not perfectly. But one swap at a time, the distance between your kitchen and theirs closes.